Are you thinking about taking a creative writing course to help you become a better writer? Well, my guest today is a creative writing professor, and he's going to tell you whether or not that's a good idea coming up. Hey guys, welcome in. This is the one-on-one interview show here on the How to Be a Better Writer program. Tim Knox here with my old buddy, my old pal. Some of you may recognize this gentleman as my partner in crime on the Digital Entrepreneur Show. He also has his own internet talk show. He is a writer, a professor, probably the only guy that I know that has a degree that will actually talk to me, Professor Peter Nez. Professor Nez, how are you?
I'm great, man. How are you?
I'm doing good. This is going to be a very casual, laid-back conversation because it's just me and you.
Yeah.
But I think that...
Are you saying that I'm a casual guest?
I'm saying that you're not
I demand decorum.
You're not really a guest at all. You're just a guy who filled a slot where nobody else could.
At the last second.
No, you're an official guest, but rather than submitting, questions and doing things like I would with a real guest, I just thought
terrible.
That
sounds so bad.
Well, whatever.
Thank you. I'll be here all week, folks.
Welcome, my guest, Professor Peter Nez. Professor Nez, how are you today?
I'm doing just dandy.
Excellent. Uba duba to you too, sir. I'm glad you're on the program. Hey, the reason I wanted to have you on is, this is the program where we talk about writing, getting started, writing, editing, agenting, really everything to do with the process. The reason that I wanted to talk to you is you are not only a fellow entrepreneur and writer, but you're also a professor. You teach creative writing, and one of the questions that I get a lot from my coaching students and people in the groups is, do I need to go get an English degree? Do I need a degree in literature? Should I take some creative writing courses? So that's kind of what I thought you and I would chew the fat on today. Yeah. And who better to chew the fat with?
What are you trying to say?
Professor Nez.
I have a lot of fat to chew on.
Hey, for those few folks that don't know who you are, as I refocus my camera, tell us a little bit about Professor Peter Nez.
Yeah, thank you, Tim, for that amazing introduction. So I'm an author. I've published 7 books on Amazon, all related to kind of critical thinking, communications, mindset, self-awareness. I'm also a live streamer, so a podcaster. Tim and I both host a show with our partner in crime, Steve Gamlin, the Digital Entrepreneur Show. I'm really big on live streaming and live video and humanizing your brand and using that as a marketing tool, but also a way to amplify your message. As well as I'm a career coach, a life consultant, business consultant, live video marketing consultant, you name it. I do it all.
Let's talk a little bit about your academic career because you're also a professor. I think it's funny that you leave that out.
I didn't mention that? Oops.
The one true claim to fame that you have is that you actually got a degree and somebody hired you to teach. You leave
I don't even mention it. That tells you where my head is. It's really interesting, if I may, Tim.
Yeah.
Because when I first, my whole thing for getting into digital entrepreneurship, and I've been in business my whole life, helping my family start their business when I was 13 years old. But I got out of business and went into education because I really believed in the written word. I believed in the power of language, and I just loved it. Like I thirsted for it, and I loved storytelling. But, the reason why I'm getting more back into, if you will, if you could really say that, into entrepreneurship and having my own business, especially my consulting business, which I take very, very seriously and I love, I was sick and tired of having my students come up to me and say, Professor Nez, I just paid $80,000 for a piece of paper and nobody will hire me.
Yeah.
That killed me. And, not to bash education, because we don't want to make the show about that. There's a lot of beautiful attributes to having an education. I think having a degree I want my kids to go there if they so wish and if they so desire. I'm not going to force them, but I would like them to, because they have that as a backup. But I was really, I'm really kind of disgruntled by the fact that a lot of our kids, and I say kids because we're older, there's a lot of adults going back to school too. They're not getting the real world practical skills that they need that transfer and translate. You know what I mean? I'm not making a blanketed statement, but for the most part, I don't think that's really up for too much debate. I think a lot of people can see that based on just, the actual results and actual test scores and actual, placement of where our educational system is in the scheme of things.
Yeah.
So, I I believe in education. I'm an educator at heart. I think what we're doing right now, your channel, Tim, is an education channel, right? I mean, Brian's channel.
Sometimes it's a special education channel.
Exactly. It's very special. It's capital S special.
Yes. Yeah.
So, I mean, educating is a thousands of year old, trade that we've been doing for forever, right? As human beings. I'm an educator at heart and I love doing it. It doesn't necessarily mean that piece of paper is the end all be all. Right. Like, same thing. This is what I tell my students, Tim. I say there's a billion, trillion, dillion people who have a piece of paper that says, I graduated. What's going to differentiate you? How can you put all of those skills that you learned on that piece of paper? How can you apply it and make it experiential, not just intellectual? Because it can't just be up here nodding your head. Oh, I get economics. Oh, I get sales. Oh, I get business. I get biology. Can you apply it to the real world? If it doesn't have that connection, I don't know what we're doing.
Let's talk about how that applies to
writing.
To writing, because you and I, we could do an entire show on our opinions on education and that sort of thing. And, we have swapped stories before because I do not have a degree. I came from a poor family where college was never even mentioned, never even thought about going to college.
Well, that's really apparent, actually.
Well, yeah, good day, baby. Believe it or not, I'm more educated than I look. But the point is, a lot of times you go to college just to check a box. And that's a conversation we can have on a completely different show. But I want to talk about how it applies to writing, because I am self-taught.
Yes.
I'm an old writer. I've written, a dozen novels. I've ghostwritten over 100 books. I make my living as an editor and a ghostwriter. So I think I'm pretty good at it because, it buys me a lot of cool stuff. But I think mine comes from call it natural talent or a gift or what have you. Now, I have gotten to the point where I am as a writer over 35, 40, 50 years of actually writing. But what about those folks, Nez, that are interested in a creative writing program? Because I don't think you have to have an English degree to write. I don't think you have to have a history degree to write. But when it comes from a creative standpoint, let's talk a little bit about what does the typical creative writing program at a college like the ones you teach at, what does it typically offer the student?
So, it's funny that you say that because, when I first went back to get my master's and it was specializing in creative writing, I came from the ultimate university of all time, which I feel like is the public library. If to really answer your question, Tim, I think if you want to go into writing, if you really, really, really have a passion for writing and you want to actually call yourself a writer, you have to do, right?
You have to write.
You have to write. Exactly. Yeah. And I think my first 10 years of writing was absolute garbage, and that's okay because everybody's first 10 years of writing is really, if you get the ego out of the way, and garbage maybe is a strong word, but it's not even near where it will be, right? As you practice and have you put into work. And so we do a lot of workshops in my creative writing classes. And just what I meant about the university I came from was the public library. Free. Absolutely free.
Right.
Ray Bradbury said the same thing. He said that his ultimate education came from the public library. If you want to be a writer, you need to be a reader, an avid reader. Somebody who really reads carnivorously. And that's where you absorb all. It's funny, Tim, because I tell my students the same thing. I say that if you don't even need Professor Nez, you don't even need Professor Nez's class. Go to the library and read your butt off. Read as much as you can. And don't just read Proust and Hemingway and Dostoevsky, even though those are amazing authors. But yeah, read some science fiction, read some, just dime store kind of pulp fiction or what have you, or detective novels. Read different things. Have a nice, array of diverse stories and diverse books in your arsenal. that you can draw upon, because you're picking up on craft, you're picking up on sentence structure, fluency, right? Vocabulary, metaphorical application. You're picking up on all of that. This instrument in here is amazing if you give it a chance. And so, do I believe that you can teach somebody how to write? I think is the ultimate question. I think craft, I think there's things that you can teach as far as craft goes, as far as, what are the best ways? But it's so funny because the written word, language, writing, it's whenever you add rules, like this is the way you need to write, or this is the proper way to write, or this is the greatest writers break all the rules. You know what I mean? Like,
you ever read Cormac McCarthy?
Yeah.
Who is my absolute
awesome.
Cormac McCarthy, Elmore Leonard. Those guys are like my favorite. I think is it The Road, where Cormac McCarthy wrote the entire book is really I don't think there's a capital letter.
There's not even a plot, really. Yeah.
Yeah. The punctuation is kind of willy-nilly.
Yeah.
You can almost hear the narrator saying the words.
Yeah.
But I think you make an interesting point there, because you talk about the mechanics of writing.
Yeah.
And writing is just like any other skill, and there is a tremendous difference between skill and talent.
Yeah.
Talent to me, Nez, is something that is inbred, not inbred. That's Alabama. It's inborn.
Lock your doors, folks.
If you marry enough cousins, you become a great writer.
That tree goes straight up.
No, what I meant was the talent is inside you. You're born with it. Yeah. And the skill is something you develop. For example, the ability to play the piano without a single lesson is a talent. The ability to play Tchaikovsky is a skill that you will develop. You know what I mean? Yeah. So in my mind, a writer, our great writer is born or made. I think they're born writers. What makes them great is what happens between then and now.
Yeah.
So I think and correct me if I'm wrong, the colleges, the creative writing programs, do they deal more with the mechanics and the semantics? I mean, the sentence structure, that sort of thing. Tell me about how they're structured.
Yeah, so the way that I would run my creative writing workshops is to, definitely have it be less lecture and more writing.
Mm-hmm.
And based upon the student's work, I would come up with my own sort of feedback and base my feedback like, okay, so we need to focus more on this aspect of your writing, plot structure, or we need to focus more on this aspect of your writing, really characterization. Who are these characters? You're not really painting a vivid picture of who these people are. And I think if you're going to go into it, and there is value to creative writing programs. I don't want to say that there isn't.
I agree.
But I think that you need to do your research and find the ones where there are actually published authors like Tim, people who are doing it in the real world, not just people who have degrees. There's a difference, not just researchers, not just people who study writing, but people who actually write. And I think that a lot of the creative writing programs are pretty good about that. They really have faculties that they hire who are published and who are really consummate publishers. Like they're working diligently in their field and writing a lot. So for me, what comes to my mind about teaching creative writing, Tim, is that Woody Allen movie. I think it was Husbands and Wives, where and I truly believe this. He says, you can't teach anybody how to write. All you can do is expose them to great works that you believe in and then hope that they get influenced by it. Yeah. It's interesting. Like there's a lot of truth to that. Like, I can teach you craft and I can teach you punctuation. I can teach you mechanics, syntax, characterization, thematic, application up the wazoo. But if there's not something to kind of, if there's not something already there that's receptive to that, or that's really got that desire to write better and really has that desire, that hunger, that thirst for the written word, it's going to become mechanical, and writing should be anything but mechanical.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Good point. I'm going to put that on a t-shirt. I agree.
You can make make money being a technical writer. And actually, here's the difference. Mm-hmm. You can be good at writing and not love it. You can be good at it. I mean, a lot of people are good at it and they don't give a rat's ass about writing. Yeah. But I think if you really love it, you can be great at it. I think that's the difference. If you really, it's funny, in my MFA program, Tim, there were students in there that drove me nuts. I mean, absolutely drove me nuts. That they were just in it they actually thought they were going to be these millionaire authors. I'm in this for money. I'm not in this I don't even care about, right. And I'm like,
Right.
do you want to be the next Stephen King? You want to be the next Ray Bradbury? Like, you know what the odds are on that? Like,
Right.
there are easier, as Gabriel Marquez says, there are easier ways to starve yourself, my friend.
Exactly. You know, the writing to me, I always equate it with entrepreneurship and business, as you know, because in my mind, a writer really is an entrepreneur, not necessarily because he can run a business, but because he comes up with the spark of an idea for a business, and then through his talent of writing can build that into a product, i.e. a book that he can then sell to customers. So to me, I know the writing is important, but I've heard it said a good editor could fix bad writing, but a good writer can never write a bad idea. And what that simply means is, you know, before you and I sit down, Nez, and write, like I write a lot of mystery novels, I've got to have that idea, that spark of a great idea. I was talking to Christopher Farnsworth in an earlier interview, and very prolific writer, bestseller, and he wrote a series of books. What was it called? The Eternal World. He wrote, he started off writing a series of books about a Nathaniel Cade, who was a vampire in the mid-1800s who worked for the Secret Service for President Andrew Jackson or Johnson. Yeah. And I asked Chris, that's a pretty novel idea. A lot of vampires out there, but not too many vampires that are Secret Service agents. He got the idea from an old news article that was actually from that time period about this guy who murdered someone and drank their blood. And somehow the guy was related to President Andrew Johnson. So that just sparked the idea in Chris's head. Yeah. And he wrote the Nathaniel Cade series, which is optioned for movies and has sold I don't know how many books. But it all started with that little nugget. Yeah. So I think that makes the difference between someone who can write based on mechanics and someone who can write really well and bring that idea to fruition. I think it's more about the idea and the talent than where you put that comma or where you put that quotation mark. You know what I mean? You
can feel it. You can feel it in the work. You can feel the enthusiasm of the writer. You can feel, J.D. Salinger once said, the mark of a good book is after you read it, you wish you could hang out with the author. You wish you were friends. You could call him up on the phone and be like, man, like these aren't people that you despise. These are people that you like. I would love to kick it with Woody Guthrie. I mean, here's a perfect example of how you don't need necessarily the polished tutelage all the time. When Woody Guthrie released his autobiography, Bound for Glory, which to me is one of the greatest books ever written, I'll be honest. I send that on my reading list to my students every year. He didn't know jack about writing. He didn't have any of the mechanics. He didn't have any of the proper, education on craft and plot and theme. And he made a lot of writers jealous of that era, that like, oh, this guy, just this Okie from Oklahoma, got lucky, and wrote this book. But he believed in it. He lived it. He thirsted for it. He hungered for it. He needed it. And he was enthusiastic. It was all there. And after that book, you wanted to hang out with a dude like Woody Guthrie. You want to hang out with a dude like Kerouac, or these kind of people. Oh, your audio's off. There we go.
Sorry about that. I hit the.
You never sounded better, actually.
I know. And then, that
was the best I've ever heard you.
It really is a better show when my mouth moves and nothing comes out. I think we're gonna do a whole half-hour show of that, Nez, just us moving our mouths.
Exactly.
Nothing coming out.
Watch the viewership skyrocket.
Yeah. What I was going to say, though, is just to follow up to your comment, is you can usually tell when someone is writing out of passion and when someone is writing out of profit. Right. Meaning, and that's what I love about the older authors, the authors that were bestsellers in the 60s and the 70s. Their books are so different than the books now. Yeah. And to me, there was much more heart and much more, I don't want to say talent, because there's a lot of talent out there now, but back then it was just kind of a different world.
Yeah.
And, it's one thing Chris Farnsworth and I was talking about. He brings technology a lot into his books. But, my favorite books are the old Westerns, the old detective novels out of the 30s. Remember the Mickey Spillane books?
Oh, yeah.
Mike Hammer.
Dashiell Hammett, Raymond Chandler.
I love those kind of books. And I think, even I will read those books and go, wow, the grammar's not great, or this is but it's the underlying story and the talent that comes through. So what do you say to students who come up and say, Professor Nez, I'm thinking about taking a creative writing class? Do you have any advice for them? Is there something you tell them they should or should not do in advance?
Yeah, I mean, do your research, find out about the program, find out if it's actually being run by people who are practitioners, not just thought experts or thought leaders or researchers or anything like that. And also, is this really, you need to take time and ask yourself, is this something that you're willing to spend 4 or 5 years, sometimes more, doing, in your precious youth? And this is something that you can give it a shot and always change your mind. You have the luxury being a young person, but I always say, make sure that you really want to do this. Make sure that you love the written word. Make sure that when you read, you don't want anybody bugging you. Like, you go into your own world. You're there, you're transported, if you will. Yeah. And that storytelling is really a big part of who you are, a big part of what you want to execute. And just do your research. I mean, there are plenty of great programs out there. There really are. I would say you don't need any of them. I'd be honest. I wouldn't be honest if I didn't say that. I don't think you need any of them, but they are very helpful. Like, I had, in my program, I had a few, I'd say very few actually, professors that really inspired me. But the ones that did really understood what I was missing and really were aware and paid attention and helped me with just little things that I needed to tweak. And it's more like a guide, that's what my collaborative workshops are all about. It's more just like having a fresh pair of eyes. Isn't that what an editor is? Mm-hmm. Isn't that what writing is all about? I mean, you said Elmore Leonard, Tim, Elmore Leonard, one of my favorite rules of his, he has his kind of 10 rules for writing. Yeah. One of them is all writing is rewriting. And I love that. All writing is rewriting. You're never going to get it. I mean, the first draft is 99% of the time it's garbage, and that's okay. Yeah. That's okay. It's supposed to be garbage. Even Shakespeare. I mean, he had a quill. Imagine if he had a computer, a delete button. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, so the first draft is always garbage. And I love Elmore. That's so true. And so the rewriting, it's the revision is where the magic, they take that magical scalpel, cut out what needs to be cut out and leave what needs to be left in. I love that. Yeah. There's an old saying that the writing is in the editing. Yes. And same with filmmaking, right? Same with video creation, totally. Right? Yeah. It's all the folks that get me is I actually had a chat the other day with a guy. He had written, 200,000 words, which is just massive. A good novel is maybe 85,000 words. Yeah. And, I asked him, I said, have you had this edited? Because that's a lot of words. And he's like, no, I'm not worried about that. I just got to get it out there and get the people reading it. And I'm like, son, if you don't edit it, no one's going to buy 150,000, 200,000 word. No, I mean, that's like what, 5 or 6 of Stephen King's books all in one. Yeah. But I mean, everything I say to my LinkedIn, my LinkedIn career coaching, all my clients, what my favorite thing to do, or my main basically, duty is hitting that delete button. It's paring it down, making it concise, making it clear. Really, it's all about making a succinct presentation of who you are, what your work is, what your expertise is. Yep. And it's the same thing with all writing. It's the same thing with all video. Cut out what needs, editing is the art. It's all in the editing. Well, I call it packing peanuts. If I read a story and it's just full of fluff and unnecessary words, to me, it's full of packing peanuts. Basically, you've taken an empty box and filled it with these little styrofoam bastards that go everywhere, but they really serve no other purpose. So I love that. I like that. I'm going to use that. And in fact, I've got a checklist that I send out to all my clients. I'll include it below. But basically, it goes along with what you said, Naz, is, anything that you can say in a word, don't use a sentence. Anything that you can say in one sentence, don't use a whole paragraph. You learn to trim that fat. And I see this
in my business as an editor, I see so many authors who will do that. I had one book in particular that had one character that was just just what I call a walk-by character. They're basically in for just a second. And this one character had like 20 pages of backstory.
Right.
And they literally were just there to say one sentence and walk off. Yeah. And when I told the author, I said, you don't need this much backstory, if any, for this character. And she was like, well, how do I know what motivates them? And and I'm like, look, darling, they got one line. Let them say it, So it's like the people that come to me with the 100, 200,000 word, novels or what have you. A good editor could whittle that down probably by about 2/3.
And a lot of authors, and I'm sure you had this too, Tim, especially when we were younger, we were married to every line. We thought every line was Joycean.
Voices. Yeah.
Yeah. And that was one thing that my creative writing program did help me with. And literally, if you take away the institutional, bureaucratic, higher ed vibe, it's literally just a group of creative writers getting together and helping each other. Really, if you, me, Steve, and a couple other people, Tim, got together and just sat at a Starbucks, that was where I got the most out of that program, where my colleagues, my fellow hungry authors, we'd all go to Starbucks before something was due and say, hey, Hannah, can you look at this? Or, hey, Stacy, take a look at my third page. What do you think of that character doing this? I mean, just a fresh pair of eyes. And that's what an editor is. I think the most fun is in the editing. I think when you first kind of vomit it out, so to speak, mentally just throw it on the page.
Right.
That's the difficult part, is getting the idea just out and just really sweating it out. The fun part is, to me, the editing. Yeah. And piecing it out. That's where the storytelling happens.
Unless you're cleaning up someone else's vomit. Then it's not so much. I stand corrected. So much fun, but I think that's one of the things that an author you have to learn to self-edit. And boy, I can remember the day that I learned that lesson, Nez. I had been a writer for a long time, and I exactly like you said, man, I love the sound of my own words.
Yeah,
look at all the words I wrote. And then I started writing a syndicated newspaper column, and my editor, I turned in the first column, and it was like 2,000 words. And he calls me, he goes, we only have room for like 500 words. And I'm like, you cannot expect me to be this genius at 500 words. And he said, look, you edit it or I will. It's up to you.
Yeah.
So that's
a good training ground. And I use Twitter as a tool too, because Twitter is 140 characters or less.
Yeah.
I've actually used that in assignments, Tim, because it's an exercise in concision, being concise. Say as much as you can. Communicate your purpose with as little words as possible.
Yeah, well,
nobody has the attention span in this day and age.
Exactly, that was the lesson. And again, it goes back to the never spend 10 pages writing what can be said in a paragraph.
Oh, I love that.
So I think that's one of the things that a lot of new authors, especially, they really have to get into it, where they self-edit. They have to, if it's not important, if it has no bearing whatsoever on the plot or the characters, cut it.
Just because it sounds pretty or it sounds poetic. And I'm telling you, Tim,
I've been there.
I was in love with my own crap. I really was. As a 19-year-old, 22-year-old, I thought I was going to be, F. Scott Fitzgerald. I had these lovely metaphorical aphorisms and diatribes, which really nothing's changed.
Yeah, you're still pretty much flowery.
If I put a daisy in my hair, you would. You just put me in the ground. But I mean, here's the thing: is like that was a big kind of knock in the head. Like, dude, you need to chill out with that stuff.
Yeah.
And now when I see it in my students, I go, oh man, this was me 20 years ago, and I have to try to convince them that, look, this is not personal. This is nothing personal. Yeah. But I'm telling you right now, you're not a special snowflake. Stop thinking you are.
Well, I think what happens is, and you mentioned earlier about the importance of reading in whatever genre you're going to write in. I think a lot of times authors, especially new authors, will they'll read every book written by their favorite author, and they'll try to mimic that author's style.
Yeah.
When I first started writing years and years ago, I wanted to be the next Stephen King. So I tried to write like Stephen King and quickly realized I'm not Stephen King. So I think that has to do, a lot of it is finding your own voice.
Yes.
And
that comes from writing. That doesn't come
exactly
from,
right.
There's no strategy. There's no tactic for that. Mm-hmm. That comes from writing your ass off. And I mean, and actually, not to kind of name drop.
Well, let's name drop.
But Hemingway did say he had to write 100 complete garbage short stories before he wrote one good one.
Yeah.
So
I believe that.
Everybody has to go through that trial and error. And you and I both know, doing video creation and video marketing, your first 10, 20, 30, maybe more videos, it shows. And even the people who are influencers in those spaces, like people we know, their first 20, 30 videos, it's just like everything. Practicing, doing, execution, and don't take it personal. It's going to be crap, but it will get better.
It's an evolutionary process.
Yes.
Writing, every time you write a word, you are honing your craft.
Yeah.
You are hopefully getting a little better and a little better. And, to me, if you're a new writer, worry about the talent first, but you've got to learn the mechanics of writing, grammar, structure, pacing, character development, because those are the things that agents and publishers look at. Naz, those are, if you can send a manuscript to an agent, and if you've got a typo on the first page, they're not going to read past that typo.
Yeah.
So it is important that you have the talent, but you got to hone that craft, and you've got to work on those semantics, whether or not you do that in a creative writing class or you do that in a book or whatever. You watch a show like this or you read something, you got to learn where to put the comma, put the quotation mark, learn how to write dialogue, show, don't tell, all of those rules, the rules of writing, which are really easy to learn. It's not like you're learning how to be a brain surgeon. You're learning where to put a comma and what to capitalize here and there. But I got to tell you, Nez, I have a lot of clients that have been writing a long time, and they still have issues with things like that.
So do I. I've been writing for over 20 years, and but here's the thing. What I wanted to say to kind of complement what you were saying about grammar, Tim, is if those of you watching and listening, especially beginning writers, don't get too bogged down with grammar and mechanics.
Yeah.
Really just get your idea out first, and don't forget that the editing is where you can go back. But definitely edit. Definitely revise. And, I think the greatest writers, I think the writers who've really made an impact and have powerful kind of stories to tell have really broken all the grammar rules, but they first learned all of them. You have to learn them first before you break them.
Yeah.
So don't get too, I would say, I'm not a big grammar fan. This is a writing professor saying this. I'm not a big grammar fan because I don't believe that the beautiful power of language and writing should be sealed. How the hell is that a verb? Sealinged should have that kind of confinement, so to speak.
Yeah.
It's play with it, dance with it, have fun with it. But then when you edit, right, that's when the real kind of science, mastery, and real work comes in.
When I became a really good writer was the day that I started editing other people's work.
Yeah.
Because looking at their work through the eyes of an editor and looking for errors really taught me a lot about writing. And
so what you just said there
got better because I was editing their work.
That's what I tell my students all the time. Like, so when I conduct my workshops, Tim, this is the number one resistance I get. Well, Professor Nez, I'm not a writer. Why am I looking at Jerry's story? That's not the point. Yeah. You're not supposed to be a writing expert. You're learning how to train your eye. You're learning how to basically imbue an editor. This is what an editor does. Nobody's looking for you to give the best advice or expert advice. Just give an objective stance. What do you see? What's working? What's not working for you? And then discuss that. I love what you said there, Tim. I'm really going to have you come talk to my class because literally
you're going to buy my ticket.
Do you mind taking a canoe? I can. That's about all I can afford.
With the power,
not an actual plane, right? We're talking like ground transportation.
Well, I thought I'd just thumb it. So I'll see you in about
thumb
a year
it,
and a half.
thumb it.
So,
I know a lot of thumbers. They're fantastic.
Well, this is the internet, so I can teach your class via webcam, no problem. I'm sure.
But that's the number one. I'm serious though, Tim. That's the number one resistance I get in my workshop. Is they're like, "Why am I looking at Tony's writing? You're supposed to." And I go, "Look, I'm gonna look at it. That's my job."
Right.
But I'm trying to show you that don't think of it as if you're going to be giving amazing advice and you're teaching them to be better writers.
Mm-hmm.
You're looking at it so you can learn how to be a better observer, a better writer yourself.
Yeah.
I love what you said there.
Yeah. When you are looking at grading the work of your students after you've done a workshop or whatever, what do you, yeah, I know. Red
everywhere. Red rum.
What do you, as a writer and a creative writing professor, what do you base your the grade on? What are you looking for in a writer or in a paper? They may not be a writer, but what are you grading that student on?
I'm going to get a lot of professors and teachers hating on this.
Nah, they don't watch this show. They're too highbrow.
They don't watch the show.
They're too highbrow.
That Tim guy doesn't have a degree and he married his cousin.
I'm sorry. You don't have a degree and you're inbred in Alabama. I'm going to go.
You're inbred.
Cat video.
I told Professor Zhang, who interviewed me on her show, Social Media Professors, and I'll say it here too. I don't give a rat's ass about grades. I really don't.
About what?
I don't give a rat's ass about grades. I don't.
Okay.
This is my criteria. Effort. You put in maximum effort, you pay attention, and you contribute to the class, meaning you participate in the workshop, you contribute, you offer your 2 cents. You're not just sitting there like a lump the whole semester.
Right.
And then time management. I'm a big believer in time management, turning your stuff in on time. You do that. And so this is my criteria. Or I can tell, I've been doing this forever. I can tell when somebody's half-assing it. But another thing, when I'm really looking at to help them with their writing, I'm looking at their purpose, their intention. What are they trying? What is the real crux of their narrative, of their story that they're trying to get across? Is it just really based on the complexity of one single main character? Is it based on the complexity of the setting and what's happening in a specific area? Is this a family drama? Are they trying to be comedic? Are they trying to use technology and write science fiction? What's the purpose of the work? And does all the language contribute to that purpose? That's literally it. So it could be characterization. It could be plot structure. It could be mechanics. It could be syntax. It could be their introduction, how they introduced the story. It could be how they ended it. Endings are huge, right, Tim?
Right.
How you end a book is probably maybe the most important aspect of a story in some regards. And so we look at what really gives this the maximum juice for your story on what you as an author, what intention you're trying to get across. And really, sometimes you just nix the author. Say, you don't even count. Now that this story's come out of you, let's try to figure out how to best tell this story. What will be the most effective kind of tools that we can use to make this the most powerful, effective story it can be?
Yeah, I like that because you can come at a story from so many different angles. If it's, especially that's what I really like about fiction is, I can write
there's
in
no
first.
rules, really. Yeah.
Well, there's no rules. I can write in first person. I can write in third person. I can do past. I can do, if I want to write a historical novel in Scotland in the 1300s, I can do that. The key there is to do your research. That's one of my pet peeves now is I had a book recently that I was editing and it was set in the early 70s and everyone had a cell phone. And and the author, it was a young lady. She goes, "Well, you didn't have cell phones in the 70s?"
Were there self-driving cars too?
Yeah, I'm like, we barely had anything in the 70s.
Yeah.
So,
we barely had rotary.
So I think there's just so many ways to go about it. In the last couple of minutes that we have left, let's talk a little bit about your writing because I know you're doing a lot of video now, but you've written a number of books. Are you thinking about getting back and writing something new? What are you working on?
Here's one of them right here, A Conversation with Fear. That's one of the books. It actually got a pretty good review. It's actually, so I'm working on and I feel kind of embarrassed because every author's working on the novel, right? The book.
Yeah. So
I'm working on a really big book. It's a nonfiction book that's, again, based on kind of the hell that I went through with this dude living inside your head. It's called The Eternal Doubter, the guy that lives inside your brain whose favorite word is can't. So I'm working on that big book, but I need to get back. It's funny because I've said it before. I think video is the predominant form of communication in the 21st century, and I love video creation. It complements my personality. I like writing short form a lot more right now. When I say short form, I love writing blogs on LinkedIn and on my Medium and on my website. And I just think it's really the climate of the times. Attention spans are shrinking exponentially. And I'm not saying that I'm definitely not saying that. And we've discussed this before, Tim. I think books are still the most powerful tool, and language and writing will always be alive. The mediums may change, but yeah, my big work is this kind of nonfiction work, which tells about my own story and also some kind of practical tools that you can use to get out of your own way. And I love writing short form. I love writing blogs on my LinkedIn site and my Medium blog and my website.
Are you ever drawn to writing fiction?
It's interesting. Like I've written fiction before. I've written a lot of fiction, but I haven't, lately it's been predominantly nonfiction. It's a funky thing, that little muse, right? That little, it's a funky thing. She just kind of decides what's going to come out of you. And if I don't pay attention to that, it'll come off as inauthentic. This is what's kind of coming out of me right now. It's not to say I won't go into fiction again. I really started in fiction. That was my first kind of foray back when I was young, and for years that ensued. But lately it's been maybe just because I don't know what it is, just this period of my life.
I think it's where your brain is.
Yeah.
And I don't mean that a bit against your brain. God help you.
God knows where.
But the same holds true with me is, because of my editing business and my ghostwriting, I could not tell you the last time I wrote anything for me.
Yeah.
Because let's face it, you got to go where the money is. Me, Nez, I'm a greedy SOB.
Hello. I
like to pay the bills. I like to live in a nice house. I like to eat.
Absolutely.
I don't want to be a starving author. I'd rather be a pretty well-off ghostwriter editor than a starving author.
You mean you can't buy a Starbucks latte with a poem?
I'll tell you what, I think I made $12 last week on Amazon from my books. So, but no, the point there is, because I spend so much time in the craft, but I'm doing other things, the last thing I want to do at the end of the day is sit down and work on my own book. You know what I mean? Yeah. I'm one of those writers. I've always been this way. The mood has to strike me. The muse in my case is this large, hairy woman with a hairy lip who pokes me with a stick, and she doesn't come around very often. So, I have to wait for her to come back.
It's so really quickly on the muse. She's a funky little mistress, and she has her own kind of way about you. But I think the key thing is not to, and I'm sure you've talked about this on your channel. The key thing, especially new writers, don't think that you have to wait around to be inspired.
Yeah.
She really knocks on the door the more that you're available, meaning the more that you're working, the more that you're putting in the time and putting in the effort, the more that she sees, okay, this dude's actually putting in the time and effort. Maybe I'll go give him a few ideas. Yeah. So I truly believe in inspiration, but I don't think you should wait around for it. Go grab it.
Yeah. It's like waiting around for opportunity.
Yes.
They'll say opportunity does not knock. You have to open the door and get your ass out there and go find that guy.
That was a hard lesson, Tim, for me as a young writer, because I thought I was so artistic. I thought I was so like, yes, don't leave. I read Notes from the Underground, and I read the Brothers Karamazov and Hamlet. I thought I was so cool when I was just a dimpy little dork.
You were just a nerd reading. Really
a complete Momo, which is Italian for basically a jerk off. And so
I love that.
Yeah.
Momo.
I'm a Momo. And so, it was a tough lesson to learn. Like you got to put in the work. You got to really, if you really love this, if you really want to do this, go. Stephen Pressfield wrote a great book called The War of Art. It's a great book for anybody who wants to be a writer. The hardest thing about writing is sitting down. So get to it. Once you sit down and you start you find yourself getting over that initial hump, the juices start cooking and your fingers start tapping with or without you. Yeah.
Over the years, I've probably interviewed, I know over 100 different authors, and a lot of them were New York Times bestsellers. And every time I would ask them, what's the key? It was put your butt in the chair, your fingers on the keys, and begin to type. So, hey, Professor Nez, my favorite Momo in the whole world. Tell the
Hashtag
folks,
Momo.
tell the folks really quickly what all you've got going on and where they can get more information about you.
Yeah, so I'm doing a lot of consulting. I'm doing a lot of career coaching. So you can find me at my website, www.professornez.com. I have 2 live stream shows. One's called Mindset Live, and then my interview show, which Tim has been on. We were honored to have Tim Knox as a guest. Nez Nation Live. You can find that at my Facebook page. If you just Google Professor Nez, you'll find everything. My YouTube channel is growing like crazy. I'm very pumped about that. It's all about kind of discovering who you are and sharing your story. So, yeah, we're doing a lot of great things.
And Nez is a huge proponent of live video.
I love it. I absolutely love it. Can you imagine, Tim, if Mark Twain could have gone live?
That could have been very cool, sitting there rocking with a cigar. And
how cool would that have been? He'd
yeah.
been like, yeah, screw you. You didn't like Huckleberry Finn.
Exactly. Hey, Professor Nez, this has been a lot of fun. Hopefully it's been helpful to at least 1 or 2 of you out there. And don't forget, Professor Nez and I also do the Digital Entrepreneur Show right here on YouTube with our buddy Steve Gamlin. We let that go, every Friday at noon Pacific time. And don't forget, if you have questions or comments, do me a favor, leave them below. And if I do use your question or comment in a future show, I will shoot you a digital copy of my book. And I'll give you Nez's private phone number so you can call him up and listen to the Momo complain.
Sure.
All right, Nez. Hey, man, it's been fun. Let's do it again soon.
Absolutely. Thank you, man.